Despite its earlier promises, the New South Wales State Government has recently approved the Wallarah 2 coal mine here in the Wyong region. This investment, led by the state-owned Korean Resources Corporation, is seen by some as a boon for local jobs. Others, however, have described it as the biggest policy mistake ever committed on the Central Coast. This report is brought to you by Alex Hergay.
The next Liberal National Government will ensure that mining cannot occur here, will ensure that mining can't occur in any water catchment area, and will ensure that mining leases and mining exploration permits reflect that common sense. No ifs, no buts, a guarantee.
The government unfortunately backflipped on the promise that Barry O'Farrell made, and what is most disappointing is Gladys Berejiklian was part of that shadow cabinet that made the commitment to our local area. So we're at this position. I think it's unfortunate. I've said all along, the whole process is geared towards awarding these licences. So they don't say no, they say how can we do it? Right. And I think that's an unfortunate part. As I said many times, this isn't necessarily about mining itself, it's about where we mine. And we've had a prolonged drought, we've got growing population on the Central Coast. We have lots of evidence from not just locally around New South Wales, but across Australia and internationally, that water catchments and water aquifers are affected by these sorts of developments. We also know that the government's had to put in place 122 conditions. So they've obviously got concerns as well. And we just continue to say the risk is too great.
Barry O'Farrell with his famous no ifs, no buts, it'll never come back until we win the election and then we'll bring it back statement. And as you say, it threatens our water catchment here. There is not one single sensible, rational reason to be making a new longwall coal mine, well anywhere, but particularly here in this region. 300,000 people, beautiful environment, direct pollution from the air pollution. We know the proponents' own documents say 3 people a year will die who didn't need to die because of the air pollution created by this mine. Just that alone should be enough to stop it.
Current Berejiklian government also takes the view that they need to punish the people of the Central Coast because they didn't vote their people back in again at the past 2 elections. But I mean, let's be honest, in 2011, the only reason why Labor lost the seats it did was because the government, or the opposition then, the Liberals, made the ultimate guarantee in writing and in public. That no ifs, no buts, a guarantee, we will stop coal mining, we will put through legislation.
Like most people moving up to the Central Coast, who most of them are not aware of this issue, we bought it to get away from the rat race and to have a really nice, healthy lifestyle. And to find out, we went to all of the PAC hearings and we sat through them all and felt very confident to purchase land. It's like, there's just no way. And to find out that it was approved after that last one, it was just horror. You wonder how it's possible.
And the Premier was very vocal, as were some of the others, even Prue Goward as well, that this mine should not happen, and only a Liberal government could ensure that the legislation went through because the Central Coast water catchment was sacrosanct. And the thing is, it is a major water catchment supply for 330,000 people.
It'd be terrible 10, 20 years down the track we find out that there is heavy metals, etc., that can't be purified out of the water, and that creates health problems. So, but we don't know where they're going to put the water. That hasn't been negotiated yet. We don't know what process they're going to use because they've said, oh, we can put that off until 10 years. Well, that's too late. We need to know up front exactly what they plan to do, where they plan to put it, and what effect that could have on the community.
If the water in our valleys is stopped, and if the water for the Central Coast is stuffed up and we can't get water, we're going to have to either tap into Sydney or Newcastle or both to get the water for the people of the Central Coast. And don't forget, we've got another 40,000 homes going into the northern part of the Central Coast. At the moment, we've got a population of about 320,000. Very shortly it'll be 400,000, and that will drain the water out of Sydney and Newcastle if this goes ahead.
The government has, or will allow, the mining company in the 10th year to recycle mine water and put it back into the water catchment. Now, there's been no public consultation about that. That was a decision made between bureaucrats and the company without any public consultation at all, and we're supposed to just accept that.
The Mine Subsidence Board no longer exists, which is where it would go through, and even people who do suffer subsidence, they spend years and years and years like at Chain Valley Bay and don't get what they should, and then they die before it happens. But here now, with the abolishment of the Mine Subsidence Board, the people have to deal direct with the mining company about compensation. Now, once their property starts cracking up and falling around, Wyong Coal, or the South Koreans, aren't just going to start writing out cheques. They will dispute it and they'll draw it out, and then these people will have to go to court and fight it, which will probably be untenable for them to do it. So their lives will be shattered.
The Wallarah 2 mine is one of 11 new coal mines or coal mine expansions that's happening across New South Wales right now. 11 mines in the planning system. A couple of them have already been approved, like Wallarah 2, that communities are now pushing back against. And so we, as the Lock the Gate Alliance, we're just working with community groups across the state who are fighting to protect their drinking water, their farmland, or their communities from coal mines and the coal seam gas project that are just inappropriate and unwanted in those communities.
Sure. So our office takes a very thorough assessment of all cases that are going to put substantial resource pressure on our office. The Wallarah 2 project is quite an extraordinary project when you look at the iterations of it that have been going on for a number of years now, and the potential impacts that it has both in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and the contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, but also the potential threat to the Central Coast water supply and the rather extraordinary measures that are included in the development consent, which require potential acquisition in the future to deal with water loss to private property owners, but also to the Central Coast water supply. So we thought that taken as a whole, this is a case of really great significance with huge public interest elements.
It's technically private money, and if they put the money in that goes broke, well, that's not the government's problem as far as they're concerned. As the public, we're left with the damage.
Yes, indeed. That's
so, you know, and the fact that they don't properly rehabilitate. A lot of these mines at the end of their life are not rehabilitated, they're mothballed, so they actually don't do the work they need to do. And it's a foreign government, so most of the profit goes overseas as well. So the benefit back to the community versus the pain isn't equal.
Well, like Adani, the numbers come down every year anyway, and we just need to look at the Hunter and see the history of increasing unemployment in mining in the Hunter over the last 2 or 3 years, where hundreds of jobs are being shed every year as coal miners increasingly automate their production. And we know that any type of mining is, unless people are being completely exploited in terrible conditions in Africa and South America, most mining is moving to total automation. There'll be half a dozen people running the control panel in a room somewhere.
The company can't proceed until the water sharing plan is approved. That has to be approved by the federal government. But we know that the South Korean government, for example, has put a lot of pressure federally to have this approved. And you know, sometimes we have to understand that it's not a fair playing field. The community has to raise its own funds to fight these things. When they go to court, they're up against very powerful companies or the government itself. So it's very, very difficult. But common sense tells you that there's some places you shouldn't mine. And really we'd be asking the federal government to reconsider this. There's a new Environment Minister. The last Environment Minister went into hiding very quickly. They issued their determination you know, at the 11th hour, almost in secrecy. It should be an open process that the public can be very confident in, and at the moment there's no confidence at all.
See, the mining company was required under the Director General's requirements to do a large number of water bore test holes across the mine area, across the valley floor in a grid fashion. That's so they could determine the hydrology and whether or not the mine would impact and so on. That was never done. They were worried that if they came onto the people's lands, all sorts of things may happen to them. But anyway, they never did it. Now, the data that was used for their report in 2010 which was for the 2011 PAC hearing, which was the same report they used for 2014. It's never changed. The data that was used was data from a water gauge on Wallarah Creek, which neither flows into or from the mine area. And that water gauge only operated from 1969 to 1976.
So we're talking really old data.
Yeah, and the other data came from a broken gauge on Kidman's Lane at Wyong Creek. And it again was old data.
The citizens of the Central Coast will not take this lying down.
It's just such a huge shame, and especially I'm very passionate about local farming and local food and clean food production, and we have a lot of local farmer friends in the valleys, right in the end of the valleys like we are, who I personally don't see how they're going to survive what's ahead if it does go ahead.